Okay, we are going to talk about boundaries a little bit more. We mentioned something in one of our other videos on boundaries called inner lawsuit. And so it's important to understand what this is so that when we're practicing the other things we talked about in the boundary videos, that you understand if you have an inner lawsuit going because you have an established relationship where you've built up habits of thought around the person and around the disagreements or the way that the relationship is.
The way,
yeah. So that's called an inner lawsuit.
Power struggles.
Power struggles, yes. So the inner lawsuit is something that needs to be dealt with first before having the good, clean boundaries or seeing the person in the divine and letting God handle the situation. We have to deal with our inner lawsuit first. How would you describe the inner lawsuit?
Well, when we see a conflict arise between ourselves and another person that really triggers us emotionally, we're not necessarily responding from peace. We feel defensive, and we have an expectation that the other person may or may not be capable of, depending on their level of self-awareness. So we get locked into a habitual way of battling another person because we're very dissatisfied that they're not fulfilling our expectations. And the pattern that you develop over time, once you've done that repetitively, long term, that becomes what's called an inner lawsuit, where you guys are stuck and nobody wants to break the power struggle. And nobody wants to be the first one to come from a place of peace.
It's like your brain is just stuck in a loop of thinking about the situation.
You think the worst.
In the person in a certain way.
You feel hopeless.
Yeah.
You feel helpless. You feel you're being victimized. You think the worst about the other person. And your mindset is creating a feedback loop with you and the other person. And it feels like a trap. And you just can't get around. You know, the brain, I've said this in the past video on boundaries, the brain is very comfortable with what's familiar. This is how neural pathways are laid down. So even if something's destructive, if it's familiar, the brain takes pleasure in it. So if you've been in a long-term relationship or a long-term family dynamic where things are just feeling impossible between you and the other person.
And this can happen unconsciously when we're children with our parents or siblings because we felt our parent as a sibling didn't provide for us or take care of us or nurture us the way our human needs needed to be looked after. And so it can be an unconscious lawsuit that you're carrying and always just angry and frustrated with your parent. And maybe you don't even understand why. Or you feel guilt and shame from a parent who, used punishment and shame to shame you. And you don't know why that's happening. Yeah. So you have to investigate.
Your brain developed pathways on feeling a lack of safety. And when you become an adult and you're with a relationship with a parent, that parent may or may not have changed their behavior, but if you're still coming from the same place, I've seen plenty of cases where parents are clearly not behaving the same way, but the child refuses to let go of their resentment. There's certainly plenty of cases where the parent hasn't changed at all and you're in an adult relationship with them and it's still not safe. But in order for the situation to improve, we have to start navigating how to deal and recognize when we're holding an inner lawsuit that's blocking the divine from working on our behalf. If we're not aligned with the highest truth, even if we still need to set boundaries with the person, that's okay. It may or may not mean that we need to walk away, but it's good to take some space to the point where you start recognizing your own inner lawsuit and how your brain is caught in a feedback loop and the beliefs that you have that person needs to do what you demand or change or whatever you expect, and the beliefs that you have that you are victimized. and that nothing can work out between you and the other person.
And-
that
and you-
may
you-
or may not be true.
Yes, and you might have been a victim as a child. I mean, children are innocent, so you could have been a victim of someone's neglect or abuse. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about an inner lawsuit where you continue to move through life feeling like you're a victim, and that's what we need to deal with.
Yeah, and getting rid of that mindset means doing inner transformation. And first of all, recognizing that you have an inner lawsuit. Getting clarity on what you can transform about yourself is all you're responsible for. But if you want the conflict to end between you and another person, and you think there is a potential, and you see there is good in the other person, if the lawsuit is dropped, the power struggle ends. And it doesn't end overnight. You're resetting a pattern that's very, very set and familiar between you and the other person. So that pattern is what becomes a belief that both people are holding. When you take the step back and decide, I need to confront this, I need to take some space for a minute, I need to own the fact that I'm creating a lawsuit and this person may actually be capable of change. If I transform the judgments and the expectations, within whatever is actually respectful behavior, and the dynamic that I'm holding frozen in my brain, and I start working on that, and I come from a different place and transform myself, then maybe I could step back with that person. There's some situations where that is okay to do. And you can say to that person, once you're in a place of peace, not before, but once you've obtained peace, I've made a commitment to peace in myself, and I'm suffering in our relationship, and I don't have all the answers, but I would like us both to come from a place of peace. You can't do that if you can't ask for that if you haven't done it first.
And it takes especially with long-term relationships, partners, and parents, family members, it takes a long time to break that lawsuit, to chip away at that lawsuit so we actually do truly become peaceful. But once that happens, if you drop the lawsuit on your side, that actually creates an energetic opportunity for the person to change and relate to you differently. And we've seen this happen time and again. And we have teachers in the yoga tradition that tell stories about students that have come to them. For example, the one I'm thinking of is a wife came to this particular guru. She was complaining about her abusive husband, and the guru has just told her, you need to change. You need to drop this lawsuit. He called it something else, but you need to drop your resentment, and you need to start seeing that your husband is they would say God, and the God light is in him, and you need to start doing this meditation of offering them flowers continuously every day. And the person did it for months, then finally went back to the husband. And
after they stepped away.
After they stepped away, but they went back after a month, as from I remember the story, and the husband had changed because of what the work that the wife had done. And so we've heard the gurus tell these types of stories. If you go and change your lawsuit and drop the anger and resentment and you truly become peaceful, energetically, the other person could shift with you saying nothing at all. And that does happen.
I had a sibling who was really struggling a lot in life with certain choices they were making, and I saw how much I was constantly giving them advice, and that advice made them feel judged, and they got in a power struggle, and they did not listen to anything I said, and I kept seeing them suffer in their marriage. And I caught myself that I was creating a lawsuit between me and the sibling, and it literally took me 5 months to change my thoughts. We lived far away from each other, so that was easier, but I spent 5 solid months recognizing the arising of the expectations and the judgment that I had that they needed to change at all, because they didn't want to change and they didn't want my advice. And the more that I thought I was being loving giving it, the more they got into a power struggle with me, the more their difficult husband started disliking me. And even though I didn't say anything to him, he felt threatened. And so when I finished that 5-month period, It took about a year for them to notice that I was not doing that anymore, that I had completely stepped out of the dynamic, and that I had dropped the lawsuit against them, which meant I let go of the expectation that she stand up for herself. I let go of the expectation that, he needed to change, some of the really cruel behavior that he was doing. And I just said, this is their business. They're suffering. I have compassion. And this is a key when you're trying to change a lawsuit. Focus as deeply as you can, not only on your pattern of, what your ego loves and takes pleasure in, which is the belief that you have that somehow you need to control the situation or change it, but then also focus on the fact that I see the divine child inside of these people. I see the true nature of the innocence and love that they have, and I see that they're confused and they're struggling and they're suffering, and it's God's business and it's not my business. So I rearranged my brain, and because a lawsuit creates such a pattern, it will take the other person time to realize that you're coming from an innocent, light, loving place when you've changed that behavior. But I was really committed to transforming myself. And that year passed, and all of a sudden, they both started coming to me seeking counsel from me. They both started trusting me and listening and sharing things with me, whereas before they were defensive. And even when they did that, I stuck to my rule and I did not interfere. I just said, I have compassion for you and I want the best for you and I can't get involved. So I changed that dynamic and situation, and we all are going to have people in our lives that we get really trapped in a dysfunctional way of treating each other, thinking about each other, responding or reacting to each other. You can change that if you take ownership of it and catch yourself. And I had to basically, over that 5-month period, what I was doing was rewiring my brain to get out of the pleasure that the brain naturally, unconsciously, it wasn't conscious pleasure, like, oh, I love telling these people what to do. I was always worried about them. I had to say, I got to drop the worry. I got to put this in God's hands. I got to respect that it's not my business. I got to stay out of it and know that they're choosing their path, and that's up to them, and they're resistant to change. So it's nobody's business. Anytime someone's resistant to change, unless they're a child, and then maybe you still have some parental responsibilities and you have to be patient with them, there are circumstances that really aren't our business that we would love to interfere with. You can't even do that in your thoughts. You have to change yourself in order for that person to trust you and respond to you differently, and let them have their journey. You may have to step back for a longer period of time if the person's doing something destructive, and you can still love them. Boundaries don't have to be, forceful ever. But
in fact, they're probably the opposite of force. They're being reserved and being allowing your energy just to only be with you and not spreading it out and entangling with everyone. So it's the opposite of force. It's actually learning how to be reserved and retreat so that the divine can sort out things for you, and you take trust and shelter in the divine.
And when you have a belief about someone where it's very jaded and you're not seeing the good in them, they're going to prove you right.
Yeah. They're going to respond to that energy.
They're going to respond, and they're not going to come from their highest good. You're not going to change every person on the planet. Some people are just going to be resistant. That's true. But if you're in a long-term involvement with family or partners, and your lives are deeply intertwined, and you love each other, and you know there's good there, and you want to give it an opportunity to change direction, seeing the part that we have control over, which is only our own thoughts and actions and the way we speak, is the number one thing that you can do that will change the situation. So you have to see the lawsuit that you're holding another person in. And you have to be extremely patient, because only after you've changed, which is going to take you time, will the other person start to respond to you differently slowly, because they will see the landscape is completely altered. And they need to build up trust again.
So you can review our other boundary videos, and then you can start checking to see if you have a lawsuit going or not. And then we'll probably do another video on how to do a prayer, how to create a good prayer to help God see, help you see and have God show you what the lawsuit is and how deep it goes. So,
and we talked a lot in the last video about really seeing the divine light in another person, holding an image of them in their highest good.
So we'll continue to put more videos up about this stuff. So please like, subscribe, smash that bell button, comment.
I don't know what.
And donate to our work so we can continue to do this stuff. And thank you so much, guys. Bye bye.
Bye bye.